Good morning, everybody, and I appreciate you all for tuning in to Silent No More, the podcast. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here this morning. So we have 2 people already, and so hopefully you all have it within yourself to share the video with your followers so they can see what we're talking about this morning. So again, this is Silent No More, the podcast, and the topic today is overcoming childhood trauma. So we have 3 beautiful women who are going to be here today to talk about their stories and their experiences with childhood trauma and where they are today. But I wanted to share a little bit of information about you in general about me. Okay. So I was minding my own business. It was just a couple of weeks ago, minding my own business. And I was at a lunch meeting with another principal within the district. So I'm a principal in Louisville, Kentucky. So I was having a lunch meeting with another principal, and my phone rang, and my cousin called. So I was on a live earlier, and she said, "Say something about me. Say some more. Say some more." So I told her I was going to tell this story. Well, she didn't know what story I was going to tell, but this is the story I'm telling. So we were meeting because I was working with them with their systems and how to open up the school and all the things. And my phone rang, and it was my cousin, and she was FaceTiming me, and she has never FaceTimed me. Now, we've called each other on Messenger, video Messenger, but FaceTime call, we've never done that. And so I panicked. I said, "What in the world's happening here? Why is she calling me? Trying to get me to talk to her on FaceTime. Something's got to be wrong." I stepped away from my meeting. I answered the phone, and she was bawling in tears. So I said, "Brace yourself, Monica, because I don't do well with emotions. I don't. I'm just going to be honest." I said, "Brace yourself. It's going to be some bad news." I said, and I'm going to say her name because she wanted me to shout her out this morning. So you get the big shout out right now. I said, "Michelle, what is wrong?" And she said, I said, "Everybody relax, calm down. I need you to tell me what's going on. What's wrong?" And she said, she couldn't get it out. I said, "Did you read my book?" She said, "Yes, girl." She said, "I had no idea you went through all that. You don't look anything like all the stuff that's been exposed in your book. I didn't know. I didn't know." And I said, "Get yourself together. Okay. I can tell you're at work. Dry your face. Get yourself together and call me once you're off work so we can have a conversation about it." So what had happened was I was talking to her sister earlier in the week, and I said, "I'll just share a link with you with the rough draft of the book. Just read a couple of snippets and tell me what you think." So they had their own little conversation. She said, "I'm going to go ahead and send this book over here to Michelle." And she couldn't handle it. Bless her heart. So you got your shout out, sis, cousin, sis. You got your shout out. Now everybody knows that you were a weeping willow reading my book. But anywho, the purpose of the show today is to talk about childhood trauma. The first theme of my book, Daughter in the Shadows, is all about my experience with childhood trauma. And it started at birth, and it lingered throughout my childhood. And so I tell different stories that I experienced with childhood trauma, and I'm very uncut. The story is uncut. It's my perspective of my experience with the adults that were supposed to protect me. So, and I'm honest. I didn't say anyone's name. No one is listed. Their names are not listed, but they are the experiences that I had are outlined within the book, and it is explicit. So, again, my book is called Daughter in the Shadows. The first theme is all about my experience with childhood trauma, which is the reason for today's show. I want you all in the Southern Indiana / Louisville, Kentucky area to save this date. Okay. October 22nd. Say it with me. October 22nd. We are going to have a mini conference, a mini mental health conference / retreat at W.E.B. Du Bois Academy to promote a healthy mental lifestyle. in that during that time, we're going to have vendors, and I'll be one of the vendors. So you'll be able to purchase a hard copy of my book that day. You'll be able to purchase copies via Amazon before October 22nd, but that's going to be my official book signing / launch will be October 22nd. So save that date if you are in the Kentuckiana area. Family, if you like to travel, let me know, and I'll make sure I get you a deal at a hotel here, and there. Probably a Marriott, because I do have an inside person that can get you some discounts there. But if you want to travel and you want to stay at a hotel, let me know, family. All right. So without further ado, I think I've done all the plugs I need to make. We're going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. We have 3 so far, and Jeremy Taylor may be able to log in later. He messaged me this morning. He was very apologetic, very upset because I guess there was a storm in his city. He's not from this area. So I guess there was a storm in his city yesterday, and they canceled a lot of the sporting events. And so they opened up the gym that he oversees today. And he said it's packed to capacity. And he also volunteered to log in, but with the noise in the background, the kids playing, I said, if you could just log in closer to the end, and then we can still have space for you to tell your story. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panelists who are with us. We have Felicia Wren, Dr. Lucretia, and Nakia. Thank you, ladies, for being here. Y'all look so beautiful this morning. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Doing good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I was younger when this little technique came out, some years and years ago. It was on A Different World. And I used to love Whitley. So she was having a little issue with Dwayne. I think it was like a holiday. And there was a therapist there. And she said, I need you to relax, relate, and release. Okay, because I need you all to be able to relax, relate, and release. You can tell your story and heal some people, because I really believe there's going to be healing that takes place today. All right. Before we get started officially, I want you all to introduce yourself, and then I'm going to show a brief clip of a video that talks about childhood trauma. So we'll start with Felicia, followed by Dr. Lucretia, and lastly, we'll have Ms. Nakia to share about themselves. So Felicia.
My name is Felicia Wren. I am a single mother of 3 boys. That's pretty much it.
That's good. Dr. Lucretia.
Hi, my name is Dr. Lucretia Starnes, and I am currently living in Florida and traveling. So if there's a lag,
as we just had, then that's why, because she's traveling and she's living in Florida, living her best life. I'll be in Cape Coral the end of September. So we'll be neighbors. So she'll finish that when she comes back on. We'll go ahead to Nakia.
Hi, my name is Nakia Goodwin. I am the mother of 1 daughter and 1 dog. So I very much think she's a part of our family. So yes, glad to be here. Thank you so much, Dr. Hunter, for having me.
Absolutely. So let's see. Are you there? Okay. You want to go ahead and finish, Dr. Lucretia, and we'll show the snippet.
Okay. And again, I'm from Florida. I live in Florida, and I am traveling. So excuse the interruptions, and we're going to just try to roll with it. But Dr. Lucretia Starnes, and just happy to be here, and happy to be able to have a platform in order to tell my story and really begin the healing process.
I love it. I love it. So ladies, if you could go ahead and mute your mics, I'm going to show the really small snippet that tells us a little bit of an outline of what childhood trauma is. And if we know someone who's experienced childhood trauma, how we can support them now, especially as their children. And this will unpack that for us. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and share our screen and get started.
The emotional effects of childhood trauma are well known, but new scientific research reveals that child's positive and negative experiences can shape and reshape the brain. Research suggests that the more a child witnesses violence, the more neural connections are created in regions of the brain that involve fear, anxiety, and impulsiveness, while fewer are created in regions that involve reasoning, planning, and behavioral control. The good news is the young brain is malleable or plastic, and fostering stable, supportive relationships can prevent or help reverse this damage, resulting in lifelong benefits for the child's learning, behavior, and overall health. So how can you help a child in your life? Just remember these 5 healing gestures. Celebrate them with a compliment or by applauding their efforts. Comfort them by staying calm and patient. Listen to them and show an interest in their passions. Collaborate with them by asking their opinions. And inspire them with new ideas. With these everyday gestures, you can help a child look forward to a bright future.
All right, there are many other videos about childhood trauma, but I wanted to show that quick video because it gives us 5 things that we can do to make sure that if we know a child who suffered from or is suffering from childhood trauma or trauma, what we can do, we can celebrate them, we can comfort them, listen and show interest in what they're interested in, collaborate with them, or allow them to have a voice and inspire them to do great things. All right. So we have 3 ladies here who are going to share their experience and how they've overcome or their journey right now as an adult dealing with childhood trauma. So we are going to start with Felicia. Audience, if you would please give us some likes, some loves. You can comment, interact with us, ask questions if you would like, because we want you all to be a part of the conversation as well. So Felicia.
Okay, just a very quick. It's hard to sum up a childhood in just a few minutes that was filled with trauma. I was abused physically and mentally as a child, even starved as a child. I experienced abuse not only from, I remember a lot of things, going to counseling now, dealing with my childhood trauma. It just started to surface. So I do go to therapy as of now, but I had to deal with remembering a lot of things. Like some parents hope their children don't remember. I remember a lot of things that happened from when I was 2 years old and earlier. So a lot of things kids do remember. And I think I only remember because it was so much trauma that I remember all the negative and none of the happy. So for parents that have children that have experienced trauma, it's very well possible that they remember. It doesn't matter how young they are. It's possible they remember, because I am almost 40 and I remember things from 2 years old. But it was very hard growing up. Still dealing with it is still very fresh, even though it was so long ago. But now that everything's coming back up now, it seems like it happened not yesterday, but very fresh in my mind. Things that you think you put in the back or you got over, you didn't get over it once you start to talk about it and deal with those things. So I can remember, I don't know if I should go into detail some things, but I can remember a lot of things, like being locked in closets and because of that, I am claustrophobic.
So let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a story in particular, without saying anyone's names, where that happened? Who was there? Were your brothers and sisters there? Was your
Yes,
how did you feel when you were in the closet? Let's start.
There was 6 of us, and we had closets where we were under the stairs. The closet was under the stairs, so it came down in a point, and the man would make us get furthest in the smallest part of the closet and sit in the back of the closet. Then he'd stuff towels under the closet door so no light could come in. And that was at 2, and I remember that. That was at 2, and we would talk to each other through the closets. There were times when he would make us whoop each other with 2x4s, and purposely, and if we didn't hit our sibling hard enough, he would then whoop us. So it was like, you rather your sibling whoop you than a strong man. So there was that. There was, with the starving, that was another person. That was a parent. I'll say it. That was a parent that we were starved. Friends, he would have parties. Friends would come over. He cooked meals. We never ate. And it could go for days. One time, me and my siblings got in trouble because we went around the projects collecting canned goods for Salvation Army, but only for us to eat. So, and they found out about that, and we got whooped pretty bad for that. There are several things. Like I said, a childhood, there's a lot of trauma, and it recently caught up to me dealing with it. I ended up depressed for several months. I didn't realize it was depressed. I knew something was wrong. I'll say that. I knew something was wrong because I had sense to get counseling. My anxiety started to get out of control. It still is, but working on it. Um, and there was one incident that I own a gun, and I bought the gun for my protection. So I never once thought that the gun would become something that I had to get rid of. And to this day, someone is holding my gun for me. But I had started smoking and drinking, smoking weed and things, and that heightened the situation. So I had smoked weed this particular night. This was just a few months ago. And I walked in my room, and all the things that are in my room, all I saw was my gun. So I ended up taking the bullets, taking the clip out of the gun, taking the bullets out of the clip. I put the bullet somewhere, hid the clip somewhere, and put the gun somewhere. And I thought by the time I get to my senses and putting the gun back together, surely I would be okay to be not to just, I don't know what I was gonna do. I'll be honest to say, but that gun was there, and it was like, "Hey, girl, how you doing?" So, um, I had sense to get rid of the gun. I am nervous to get it back, even though I am better. I'm nervous to get it back because the fight between doing it and not doing it was so strong that night. And understanding that people that actually commit suicide, that I was there, and I understand the fight that they have, that they couldn't fight the voice telling them to do it, and not being strong enough. I do credit going to church, and I do credit I credit a lot of things about how strong I am. Like, I'm strong, that put that gun up. You're too strong for this. And I fought it that night. It was the longest fight of my life that night, but I did it, and I'm here. So, and still working to get better.
Yeah, yeah. My question is, you said that something triggered the childhood trauma to come full circle, like it just happened. Do you mind sharing, not if you don't want to go into grave detail, but do you mind sharing what triggered that flood of memories to come back?
So what triggered it, I was dating a guy for 2 years, and he was actually a narcissist. So I think the calling me stupid, calling me crazy, asked me, is something wrong with me? And I knew nothing was wrong with me, but I think it triggered the things from childhood, being told I talk too much, make your friends hate you. Like, things that I was told, or that I was ugly as a kid, or just what do you call it? I can't remember the word, it left. But just being put down as a child, and then having that happen again. Now, he never put his hands on me, but it was the fear of, knowing that it was familiar. It became familiar. And then that's when my anxiety started to get really out of control. And I got to the point, like I told my therapist, I got to the point where I was wanting to go to the woods and be by myself. And I wanted to leave my kids. And that's something that was done to me and my siblings. My mom left when I was 2. My mom left and left us in a house. So I got there, like, I always told myself, I'm never going to be like my parents. Never. So that's something that kept me, because I'm a type of person, I'm true to my word. Whatever I say is what I do. So the fact that I told myself as a child, I'm never going to be that, that's what made me stick with, I'm going to parent these kids, because then I just become who I don't want to be. So that is what triggered it, and wanting to run away and be in the woods. And I didn't want to be by anybody. I didn't, at that point, it was like people aggravated me. To hear people talk aggravated me. I stopped watching TV. I stopped listening to music. All that is starting to flood back. I have begun to listen to music again and watch TV, but for a while it had stopped. And I was watching TV, I'm sorry, but I was watching people that lived in the woods, learning how to live in the woods by myself. That's what I had started to watch. And now I don't even want to watch that. Like, it's weird how going to therapy in just a few months, a lot of things have changed for me.
Absolutely. So I'm a proponent for mental health support in the Black and brown community because it's shunned and they're stigmatized. And a lot of people who are raised in church, we hear from the pulpit, give it over to God. Just pray and fast and believe and it'll be okay. But that's not how we're wired. God didn't even wire us that way. And the Bible talks about even the ministers and elders with a host of counsel, they make decisions. That means advisors. That means counselors, therapists, whether it's a business, emotional, mental, whatever, life, they're getting it. So why are you saying now that it's something that we shouldn't do? So I commend you for talking about your journey, especially the fact that you walked into that space and you saw that's the only thing, like you had laser focus on that gun, and you sought help. You didn't say, I've had enough. And one thing that I found is I actually stayed in a relationship way longer than I should have because I didn't want to end up like my mom who had multiple husbands. And I said, I'm not going to do it. If I have to suffer and stay with this one. So I completely empathize with you when you say there are things that you will not do or that you want to do because you do not want to be like, like the way you were reared or be like the people who reared your parents. And so I completely get that. So thank you for sharing your story. Ladies, would you all like to ask her any questions or comment before we move on to Dr. Lucretia?
I just want to commend you for taking that time to go get help and to recognize that something was wrong, because so often we know something is wrong, we feel something is off, and we just keep pushing it aside and thinking we'll be okay until we do, unfortunately, like break or something like that. So I just want to commend you for taking that step to seek out counseling and to get help. And I'm so happy to hear that you're doing better now.
Thank you.
I too want to commend you for just being able to share and be transparent, because many times we layer on these facades and not really deal with the different things that have traumatized us, and to realize that it is trauma. And so I commend you for sharing and glad that you're here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And the fact that you talked about how it's still impacting you now. You know what I mean? A lot of people think that childhood trauma stops back there, and they don't even reflect on who they are as a person and how what happened to them as a child could impact who they are today. So I appreciate that you talked about this was just a few months ago that you were triggered because how you were treated, although it wasn't physical, it mirrored what you experienced as a child. So that's why getting help is so important. And that's why making sure that we follow those 5 tips that were shared in the video, even as a child. Because one thing that they said that stuck with me, and I just watched it this morning, that stuck with me is the brain of children is like plastic. So we can reverse the effect and the impact by replacing the negative experiences with positivity, with pouring into them, with breathing life into them. And so thank you for sharing how it's impacted you as an adult as well. Dr. Lucretia, you got next.
Thank you. And prayerfully, this internet holds up. But again, my name is Dr. Lucretia Starnes. It has been a journey even to obtain that. And I think with, my childhood trauma, it is something that I put off and put out of my head for so long. And then, you know how you feel like, and maybe you don't, how there's something missing. There's a reason that you're so overly driven. That was me. So I kind of took things in reverse. My childhood trauma, I started recalling different things in chunks of memory. I just always, I'm from a family of 12, so 8 girls and 4 boys from California. And I just kind of recall where my sister would say, oh, do you remember such and such and this and this? And I'd be like, no, I don't remember that. And so I found that with my memory, I put things out of my memory. And so it was my coping mechanism, in which I didn't know that was the coping mechanism. And just so oddly enough, I think that the different traumas of adult life kind of made me deal with different facets of my trauma as a child. my childhood trauma began around, I would say, around 5 or 6 years old that I recall. Or I would say one of my childhood traumas, the one that I wrote about, and I was transparent about in The Battle Behind My Smiles with Tanya White, was my battle began in my childhood. We had, a lovely home, so to speak, but it was all a front. It was a front in the sense to where it was so much hell that went on within our home life, to where as a kid, I did not want to bring anyone home because you didn't know the condition that the house was going to be in. It was a clean house. It was ran, with military precision kind of deal. But my childhood began, my trauma began with an uncle. And it wasn't a blood uncle. It was, one of the uncles, how within your families you have the aunts and the uncles, and go talk to uncle such and such, and that sort of deal. And it began at that time to where this adult took advantage of me as a kid. And in my chapter of the battle, I had to be explicit, and I tried to take out the city of how I describe my trauma and how I was molested. And then I thought, we so often don't want to deal with the ugly of what happens to us. When we kind of gloss over it or glaze over the things that happen, it is not as impactful in regards to how it happened to you and how it affected you as an individual. And so when I was writing about it, I had to stop like quite a bit, because it was just so much that it brought back within me as far as emotions. And then I had to start thinking about how it affected me as an adult. As an adult, it affected me to always push to be the best, or just over, what's the word, to over
compensate.
Yeah, over excel. And I couldn't think of that word, and it was like you always had to be the
Perfectionism,
best.
which is it?
And
Is it, you thinking perfectionism maybe? Because that is a symptom of childhood trauma,
exactly.
OCD, PTSD.
Yes, and it was like I couldn't understand why, while my best was never good enough, and so I always had to strive to do so much more. But and then I thought about it in regards to how I raised my 3 beautiful daughters. I would not let them go anywhere with anybody. It just wasn't happening. If there was someone spending the night, they would have to spend the night over my house, because I needed to make sure that my children was not exposed to being molested or touched inappropriately or any of those things, because I know how it affected me. It was, so I know how it affected me in that regards. And as I didn't even tell my daughters about this, but then once I wrote the book, or I wrote a chapter in that book, I had to address them in the sense to where, look, this is what happened to me at age such and such, to where this person was, molested me as a child. And when I went to my mother, and when I went to my stepfather, and when they didn't believe me, back then it was like, oh, you're being fast, but you were also encouraged, oh, go to uncle such and such, and and that sort of deal. But when my mother and my stepfather didn't believe me, that was even crushing. So that created a tension that stayed with me and my mother until years later. And I just thank God that before she passed away, that we did have a great relationship. But it created a big divide, because I couldn't trust her. So I grew up not being able to trust my mother, in a sense to where, because she did not believe when I told her about me being molested. And that was hurtful, you know.
Did you get any support from anybody? Because I know that at schools, in clinical spaces, you have to have the consent of a parent. Now, it's a little bit different because we have on-site counselors that can do some things at schools. Did anyone see that you had changed, or did anyone offer any support at all, or was it just hush? What happens in this family stays in this family?
And that was the thing. It was like, it was almost as if it didn't happen. And so in my mind, I think for years I set it up like as though it did not happen. In school, I mean, I was pretty much a kid that was kind of withdrawn and a reader. And so I had that as an escape, you know, because I would just read, just that was my escape. And I think my coping mechanism, really and truly, as I'm kind of unraveling this, my coping mechanism was to just put it out of my mind, to disassociate myself. So I get the disassociation of disassociating yourself, because it's like I had to recreate who I was, in that sense. And so even though there seemed to be a lot of love around me, surrounding me as a kid, on the outside looking in, you would have no clue whatsoever. You would be clueless, because our home was the home that every kid wanted to come to, or everybody, thought so highly of how my mother kept house and how she kept, all 12 kids, in line. That was a job within itself. And so I felt isolated, very isolated.
Yeah. Disassociation is real. I was talking to a therapist a couple of weeks ago, Chanel Stewart, and she actually has her own practice in Kentucky. I can't remember what the city is, but it is in Kentucky. But anyway, she was talking about how, and we were raised in church. And so when something happens in Black homes, what happens in this space stays in this space. We don't tell anybody. And so she said one coping mechanism that she's been able to pinpoint with most of her Black and brown patients is disassociation. Because we don't have help, the only thing that we can do mentally to keep from going crazy is it didn't happen, or to recreate a new memory. Mm-hmm. So, everything is fine. I can just move on. No, we're fine. We're fine. Let's not deal with that. And that's how I was until here recently. I started reading books by Brene Brown, Atlas of the Heart. I did a webinar with her just a couple of months ago, because I'm having issues even now as a 43-year-old with dating and with believing the, what they call it, the love bombing and all that kind of stuff real quick. Like, oh, this is it. Like, this might be the big one. This is the big one, Elizabeth. I've been divorced 7 years, it's about time. But I said, something's not working. Something's not working within me. So I started to read these books and learn how to be vulnerable, because that's another thing. When you've experienced childhood trauma, you're not vulnerable. You don't trust people enough to let them in, or you overshare because I'm just transparent. I'm going to tell all my business because it's okay. I know it's going to help somebody else, but we don't have boundaries. Go ahead. We're going to say something.
You hit on it there. You really hit on it there, being so transparent, and that you use my words. Oh, I'm an open book. I'm so transparent. It is what it is. And it's like, it is what it is, but it really isn't. And you really hit it on the head with that, and the church thing, because I delved into church so deep, and holiness and this, that, and the other thing. And really, it's like, even with church, even though that's our foundation, many of African Americans' foundation to kind of keep things stable, kind of that tying the rope at the end and holding on. Even with
that is, I'm just kidding.
There you go. Exactly. And it's like, and really and truly, until I step back from even church, I'm very spiritual and I'm still very religious. But until I step back from that to say, you know what, it's not okay. So you can get in here and praise the Lord and so on and so forth. But guess what? These hurts, I still have them. These scars, I still have them. How are we dealing with that? Because I haven't heard that across the pulpit in regards to
Come
that.
on.
And just so, and I'm going to wrap it up, but just so strangely enough, I would say kind of full circle, my middle daughter is a family and children's marriage and family and children's therapist. So as she was going through to get her license, it was odd because she was like, now, can you tell me more about your childhood? Because even though they know me, they did not know me until them as adults, because I just couldn't share all the trauma that I'd gone through, And so that, yeah, you hit it on the head though, with church, tying back into church and how we have our relationships within church, and how we think that church is the fix all, to where we don't go to therapy. We don't think that we're supposed to be the strong Black women. We don't need therapy. We can take care of our own stuff. I've been there, done that, and it does not work to be able to come to anybody whole. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. Let me put it like that. In order to be whole, I'm learning that, yes, I do need therapy, and it's okay. And I'm still strong, but I don't want to always be strong. I want to be able to be vulnerable. I want to be able to lean on the supports of people that is my tribe, so to speak.
Absolutely. I completely agree. It's important to have that strong support system. And it's funny because our show next week is all about spiritual abuse. So you take us to this place that's supposed to teach us how to be great, how to love, how to forgive. And that's the place I'm being abused. And it doesn't always have to be sexual, and always have to be, it's not physical. It's that mental abuse. It's that manipulation. It's what they talk about in Exodus and in the Old Testament, witchcraft, honey. That's what it is. So we're not going to go into all that. That's too much. I am going to read a couple of comments. Yeah, y'all have to tune into the show next week. Nakia is going to be on the show next week as well. That's the second theme of my book, Sexual Abuse. So I'm going to go on and talk about some of our comments, or share some of the comments. They normally show up on the screen, but for some reason, StreamYard's not acting right today. So I'm going to read a few of them, and then we'll get right into your segment, Nakia. So Tanya White said, yes, Felicia, talking and writing about it takes you right back to the moment. I have learned that reprocessing your feelings leads you to another level of release and healing. So true, because I got a lot of healing. I was reading and writing my book a couple of weeks ago, the edits, and I was a weeping willow like my cousin Michelle. So, I mean, it was very therapeutic. Valerie Price Pearson says, excited to see how this platform grows and becomes a place for those healed and whole to release, that others will become healed and whole as well. Thank you, Dr. Hunter. My Aunt Faye, good for you. So glad you're getting stronger, Felicia. Shamika, she said the folks were degrading you. Tanya, triggers are real. That is why educators unexplainably have unexplainable outbursts, from students, and that should be handled through counseling, not exactly discipline. All right. My cousin Carla said, this is so good. Oh, I'm so happy people are being healed today. This is just the beginning, friends. Kim, Alicia, my friend's son, Ahmed Price, U.S. basketball player, took his own life at age 22 just last weekend. Now I'm about to be upset. It made the news media, and many were unaware of his struggles. Black mental health needs to be talked about more. He was my son's friend, and so he let us know when it happened. He was really upset. My son will actually be here Monday. He wanted to be with family. So I hate that you had to share, but thank you for sharing, because this is important. And we have to keep things real. We can't act like stuff didn't happen and it's not happening, because it is. And we can prevent stuff like this from happening in our community, because it's happening more and more. We're losing more Black and brown children and adults to suicide. So we've got to have platforms like this for them to know they're not the only ones that have dealt with this. They're not the only ones that disassociate. They're not the only ones that have been locked in closets, or not fed, or molested, or had to take care of the latchkey kids. They're not the only ones that didn't have support at school. We had the same thing, and we don't look like what we've been through. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get into Nakia's segment. Nakia, if you would like to go ahead and share, I know you have a huge story that you would like to share, and I have an opportunity for you.
Okay.
We'll talk about this later. Okay.
All right.
Excited about it though. All right,
Awesome.
Nakia.
If I could just take a second to say something to Dr. Lucretia, I just wanted to commend you on speaking out about how you have dealt with your children and how sometimes we project, our trauma onto our children, like being so I don't want to say overprotective, because that's our job as moms to protect our children, but maybe taking some of our experiences and being so afraid for our children that they're going to experience the same things that we've experienced, that sometimes I know for me, like I've parented out of my fears of what happened to me. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up about your daughters, and how you were very like, nope, you ain't going nowhere with nobody. It stays in this house because I want to make sure. And I do think that that's a great thing, that we protect our children. But I also think that some of that is because of the trauma and the things that we've endured. So thank you for sharing that. But first, I want to say, can you guys see my t-shirt? It says Jesus plus therapy equals healing.
Come on, give him some
Amen.
praise.
Can we get an amen to that? So, and I wanted to start out by saying that, like maybe my philosophy on childhood trauma or healing is that our trauma is not our fault, but our healing is our responsibility. And when I think about the things that I went through as a child, I know that a lot of it is because of my mom and the trauma that she suffered and endured as a child that she never got healed from. And I think the thing that I've learned here recently is that that's not an excuse, and it's not a justification to how I was treated or what I dealt with as a child. So I can acknowledge her trauma and still acknowledge mine, because for so long I acknowledged her trauma to the point that I dismissed mine. And so that's probably also a coping mechanism. I'm not sure what it would be called, but I am a middle child. So I have 2 older siblings and 2 younger siblings. And if you guys don't know, middle child syndrome is real, okay? It's real. But I'm a middle child. And I grew up in Gary, Indiana, and I grew up in poverty. So I had, I think Dr. Lucretia said, like several traumas. So it's like traumatic experience on top of traumatic experience on top of traumatic experience that I was born into. And I think, unfortunately, I was born into poverty. There were times where we had our water shut off, where we didn't have electricity, where we would have to go to the neighbor's house and use their outside water hose to fill up buckets to take home to wash up. We were not like the poverty that these kids think they have now, where they can't get the Jordans they want, but the poverty where it's hard to eat and it's hard to bathe and it's hard to, you come home from school and you don't have a phone because mama couldn't pay the bills, And so we grew up in poverty, and my mom had a husband, and I was sexually abused by her husband, who at the time of the abuse, I believed was my father. And so we had this poverty, then we have this sexual abuse. And on top of him sexually abusing me, he was also mentally abusive. He would talk often about how he wanted to run away with me, how he was going to take me away from my family and just be with me. And he was the only one who loved me, and my mom didn't love me. And, so this is from a very early age. I remember being in preschool, and I remember crying and telling my mom, like, nobody loved me. So I don't even recall when he started saying these things to me, but I remember being as early as 3 and 4 years old and already having that ingrained in me that I was not lovable and that he was the only one who loved me. And so I was sexually abused. When I finally told my mom about it, I was 8. And she confronted him. He said that I was lying, and that was it. I was a liar. I wasn't really being abused. And I think Dr. Lucretia also said this, that the trust in our relationship, for a little girl at 8 years old to not have that trust in her parent, it's a big deal. And so things increasingly got worse between my mother and I's relationship between the age of 8 and 13. And when I was 13 years old, my mother signed away her parental rights. And so I was a ward of the state, and I lived in a children's home for some time. And so, mind you guys, I'm a middle child of 5. And I'm the only one that this happened to. I'm the only one that she signed away. So now you have this growing up in poverty, and then you have this sexual abuse. And now on top of that, the ultimate rejection, and from a child's perspective, it was like, oh, that's it. If mama doesn't love me, nobody else will love me, because the things that her husband had been telling me, her taking that step and signing away her parental rights, solidified that she didn't, you know what I mean? And so I don't know all the steps or everything that happened, but I know it wasn't a permanent, like, sign away. Was temporary. And so the goal was for me to be reintegrated with my family after, being away for some time. And so after about a year and a half, I went back to live with my mom and my siblings. But at that time, I mean, the relationship was so severed that it just didn't work out. And I got kicked out. Oh man, I can't even tell you how many places I've lived and how many families I've lived with. And each family that I lived with, it's a story of abuse on top of that. I mean, I don't have enough time to get into all the particulars, but I will say that I spent most of my teenage years homeless, being kicked out, going from this place to that place, moving around. And it definitely, I think in the video you played, Dr. Hunter, it was something about the connections and like stability and impulsive. Oh my gosh, I was such an impulsive person. And I understand it now as an adult and after, therapy and God, that I couldn't trust, anything in the future. You know what I mean? And so it was very hard for me to make long-term plans. Everything was like spur of the moment. Oh, I don't like this. I'm making this major life decision right now, and I'm not going to even think about it or consult anybody. I'm just doing this, I'm just taking things into my own hands. And that definitely played a part into how I lived as a young adult, very, very impulsive, just a different job every other. Not now, but as a young adult, I've thank God I've grown and I've allowed him to heal me. So, but I know another thing, it does make you very driven, because one thing about me is what I learned at an early age is that if you don't do what people want you to do and you are not who people want you to be, then you become disposable. They can sign you away. They can write you off. And so how I lived was to do things to be indispensable in people's lives. So I was that friend that was so loyal. I was so dedicated. I had no boundaries. Whatever you wanted, you want to call me at 3 a.m. and have me go to the store for you. Okay. Because that's what a good friend does. And if I do these things, I'll be valuable to you. And I carried that on. Absolutely. I carried that on into friendships, relationships, jobs, all kinds of things until, I think I don't even know if it was like a pivotal point where it like all came to a head, but I do know like throughout the years, well, you know what? I will say this. It came to a head when I was pregnant with my daughter. My husband and we got married in 2008, and I got pregnant a month after we got married. And I remember thinking about my daughter and thinking she can't live the type of life that I've lived because I refused to heal, because I knew that the trauma that I suffered was because the adults in my life that should have cared for me and should have taken care of me, they were not healed. And I didn't think it was fair for me to be unhealed and pass that on to my daughter. And so that was the turning point that I was like, okay, God, you got to help me because I'm a mess and I don't want my daughter to have the life that I've had. So,
yeah. So when you were talking, I don't want to say that you're the poster child for this, but the word I kept hearing is codependence.
Yep.
Codependence. And I was doing research a few years ago because I was going through a divorce and I wanted my kids to be mentally healthy because divorce in and of itself is traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And kids seem to blame themselves when their parents get a divorce. So I was doing all this self-help stuff. And I was doing the exact same thing. If I'm there constantly, not just for my children, but for anybody, I mean, Felicia will tell you when I was married to a pastor, I was Johnny on the spot. Oh, you need clothes? I got it. Oh, you're somebody's in the hospital? I'm there. Oh, you need me I'll keep the kids. I'll do all these things. And when I read, it's a book about codependence. I can't remember what it was, but I was like, oh, that's me. I do that. Oh, I do that. I do that. And that's why it was so easy for me to be love bombed. Well, or see something in someone else that I need to fix. Because then when you deal with severe trauma, I'm just going to be open. I have OCD and PTSD from my childhood trauma. I don't have the kind where you have to have everything neat and clean. I have the type that CEOs, and this is what my therapist told me. She said, you're probably really successful in your job because you have the type of OCD that CEOs of Fortune 500 companies have, multimillionaires have, because they can't stop. They can't stop. They just have to keep on going because I can't be wrong. I got to figure it out. I got to learn real quick and do it real quick because I can't be wrong because I will be disposable and I can't be disposable. So where do I fit? And
Absolutely.
so when you were talking, I was like, yep, me too. Oh, me too. Oh,
Yep.
me too. But we have to learn because when we are in that space, once we're completely healed, the people who we've had those codependent relationships with, they begin to walk away because we're not giving them what they're used to getting. Either that or we'll end up in a relationship with someone who needs to be made whole. And so we're doing for them to fix them so they can see that I fixed you. So keep me around. And so these are researches that I've just recently done because I'm like, I'm doing all this stuff. It's all wrong. It's all wrong. The only thing I'm good at is working and my kids. Everything, dating and stuff, I'm doing all the wrong things. And so I had to, and one reason is because I did not have a father growing up that taught me those things. And so that's another traumatic experience, being in a home with no father and then an abusive mother, emotionally and a mentally abusive mother. And so that in and of itself is traumatic. So I appreciate you, Nakia, for sharing your story. Felicia, would you like to share anything about Nakia's story? And I'm going to go to the chat too to see the comments.
Yes, I just had a question. I guess both of you can answer it. Where I'm at with my therapy is learning to forgive. So I've asked my therapist multiple times, what exactly is forgiveness? I know that sounds crazy, but have you all forgiven? And if you have, how did you get there?
I love that question.
Okay, so the first thing that I want to say is that forgiveness is something that takes place between you and God, not you and your offender, not you and the person who hurt you, not you and the abuser, you and God. The first step you need to do to forgive, even if you don't feel forgiveness, is to say, God, I forgive blah, blah, blah. I forgive my mom. I forgive my dad. I forgive my uncle, because we know that the Bible talks about power of life and death being in our tongue. So the first step is saying it out loud. I forgive it. And it's okay if your feelings don't match that at that time. But I believe what that's doing is releasing God and his angels to begin working on your behalf and healing your heart. I used to think that forgiveness meant that I had to be in relationship with people. So if I forgive my mom, then I have to be we have to go to lunch every day and we have to talk all the time. But one thing that oh my gosh, such an important lesson is forgiveness is separate than reconciliation. Reconciliation takes two parties that are working toward the same goal. So if I'm healed and I'm working towards forgiveness, but I have a mother that is doesn't take accountability, has not acknowledged her her wrongdoing, we can't be reconciled. I can forgive and I can love and I can move on, but we can't be reconciled. So forgiveness doesn't mean that you have to be in relationship with the people that you forgive. It doesn't mean that you have to be friends and go out to lunch and do all this stuff. That's why it's so important that we understand that process of forgiveness is between you and God, and you're not forgiving to dismiss what's happened to you or to justify what's happened to you. That's for you and for your heart and for your soul, and because one thing I had to realize is, like, I don't want to be anything like the adults in my life that abused me. I don't want to have a bitter heart. I don't want to treat people how they treated me. I want to treat people how I should have been treated. You know what I mean? When people do me wrong, I want to be able to be like the biblical, the epitome of the biblical woman who turns the other cheek. Now, sometimes it's not that easy, but that's what I'm striving for.
Mhm.
So anyway, I didn't mean to take that long with my answer, but
no, that was really good. And I love the part that you said about forgiveness being different than reconciliation. For me, I had to, because I'm still triggered from time to time with some behaviors, because I can't reconcile, or we can't reconcile if you continue the same behavior, right? So I can still choose to forgive you and choose my interactions with you, what's healthy for me. And that took a while for me to get to that point, because, when we're raised in the church, we're taught, honor thy mother and thy father, so your days be long. I didn't know what that meant. I figured I'll be your doormat if I need to, so I can be a couple extra years in this earth. But it also says for the parents not to push their children to a position of wrath. And so you can't take one without the other. We have to have the whole sandwich. Eat the whole roll is what the Bible says. Eat the whole roll. So what I did was, we only have a few more minutes, but what I did with my situation is, although I was rejected, and I have a fear of rejection because of constant and consistent rejection over the course of my life, the people that I actually cared for. I didn't care about people that didn't care, I didn't care about, but the ones that I was actually trying to be perfectionist for, and doing all my homework and making sure everything was good and taking care of my brother and sister, and if good enough, I decided that no matter how they are towards me, I'm going to put forth the effort to reconcile, so they can see that I love them in my effort of forgiveness. And then I'm going to step back, because I'm not going to put myself in a predicament where I continually be abused. But I want God to honor my actions and my heart, and wanting to do the right thing with honoring my mother. But at the same time, I've got to take care of my children. I have a career. I have my businesses. I don't have time or the mental capacity or space to give any more than I'm giving right now. So yes, I will talk to you. Yes, I will take you to dinner. That's me. I will send you money if you need it. But as far as any depth, for me, I've chosen not to go that route for my own mental and emotional space, because I have to be there for my kids. I don't care if I'm 90 and 100 and they're 80. They're my biggest project. I want them to know that they're loved. And so if that means to forgive and then live in a space of forgiveness from a distance, then so be it. But that's what I did. Something else. I watched a video a few weeks ago by Stephen Speaks, and he talks about what to do before you can be whole yourself, to be whole for someone else. Write down anyone that has offended you or hurt you, caused you trauma, caused you pain. Make a list of it. Take the top 3 and write a letter to them about all the things they did to you and how that made you feel. You can send it if you want. You don't have to send it, he said, but that's the beginning of the healing process. Okay. So the first one is uncut, is raw, whatever. The next letter you write the letter. You don't blame them for anything. It's matter of fact. This happened, this happened, this happened. Because of that, cause and effect. This happened with me, but this is where I am. That, if you want to send it, should be sent. If you want to send it, because it's like you're releasing it to the universe to heal you for it. And I did that activity actually with my ex-husband. I didn't send it, but I found that because of the abuse that I suffered at his hand, the mental, emotional, physical abuse, I was looking for those characteristics in other people, and I wouldn't give them a chance, which I didn't have a chance, because I'm basically punishing them for not healing what I was in 7 years ago. And when I tell you that actually helped tremendously, I mean, it helped tremendously. And I think that because I did that activity, I was trying to look for, well, who else may have hurt me that I need to dig up some other stuff to do this exercise, because it really did. And to be honest, it helped me to forgive. And I thought I'd already forgiven him, but it helped me to accept and move forward. And this just happened. I've been divorced for 7 years. This just happened like recently. So that's something else, an actual activity that you can do that can help. I'm reading a book right now by Napoleon Hill. It's an old book, and I forgot the title of it because I read so much, but it talks about faith and how The Bible talks about, this is not a biblical book at all, but the Bible talks about, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And so if we suffer from disassociation, it didn't happen. No, it did. We need to accept that it did happen. But we need to change our mindset and shift our thought process about it. And another thing that will help with that is affirmations, affirming. Because whether you have thoughts in your mind of healing and wholeness, or thoughts in your mind of I'm a victim and it'll never get better, that will manifest whatever your atmosphere is. So if you're a doomsdayer, then it's going to always be something negative. But if you can start thinking differently about yourself, even if you don't believe it right now, once you start affirming, it's like your subconscious kicks in and it starts to believe it. And then your outward actions will change, which could also help with forgiveness. So there are a couple of YouTube videos that you can pull up on forgiveness affirmations and start that work, and that'll help too. All right, so we are actually out of time. So I want you all to give yourselves a round of applause for sharing your stories, because I know that you had to be brave, you had to be courage, you had to have courage, and you had to have confidence to speak your truth, despite who may see this, because some of the folks that may have hurt us could potentially see this, but this is your story and you should tell it unapologetically, period, because it happened to you. And so now let's heal and move forward together. So Felicia, and then Nakia, and then Dr. Lucretia, if you have any services, any products that you provide, or if you want to share your social media handles. I know Felicia she's a TikTok, TikTok viral person. She's gone viral a few times on TikTok. So share whatever you have, and then we're going to wrap it up.
I really don't have much. I don't do much. But if you have a DIY, I got you.
Yeah, she's remodeled her whole house, her outside, or all the things by herself. Built a deck. I said, what is she out there doing? And I mean, and she does it well. She does, so she can get it done. So yeah, we got to get you a price point, a price list.
That's part of that OCD trauma.
It probably is. It's not project driven.
It definitely is.
Yes. So we got to get you some price points, because me and Tiny were actually talking a couple of weeks ago about what does she call it? The lady with the hammer or something. And you can get you a whole crew and get this monetize, honey, monetize. I'm all about building your brand. So thank you, Felicia. Nakia.
So I don't have anything like that, but I am a board member for an awesome organization called Foster Care in the U.S. And because I was a homeless teen and I lived with so many different people, I'm so passionate about this. And Foster Care in the U.S. is a nonprofit organization, and we are committed to ending homelessness for our youth and for our foster care kids who have aged out of the foster care system. So if you guys want to check out our website, is fostercareintheus.org. It's a donation button there online. Please donate and help us end homelessness for these foster care youth and these youth that are homeless.
Thank you, Nakia. And Dr. Lucretia.
Again, thank you, Dr. Monica, for inviting me. I have several things. I have the Starnes Consulting Firm, and I can be reached at starnesedconsulting.com. And I'm also a realtor here in Florida, and I can be reached at thestarrealtor.com. And so, again, that overachievement, and I just heard so many things that resound in regards to traumatized youth. I really did. It's been very enlightening. But yeah, thestarrealtor.com, Florida. Come on, check me out.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. And so I am launching, drum roll, please. Can I hear that? Okay. I'm launching a life coaching service. So if you want more information about how I can help, and this is why I launched it, because I'm doing it anyway, and I give all these folks my time and I'm not monetizing. And so that's what I'm moving towards, monetizing my coaching business. It's called The Press, and PRESS stands for Powerful Resilience Embodied in Self-Sufficiency. So if you want to be a part of my press cohort or cadre, you can reach me at drmonicahunter@gmail.com. My book launches again in October. We'll have you'll be able to order on Amazon in September, but the actual book launches in October. And I want to talk to you, Nakia, about getting you in one of my anthologies that is to come. Okay.
I'm excited to hear more about this.
I know. I'm excited too. I'm excited too. All right. So thank you all for tuning in. You've got to tune in again next week. We're going to talk about overcoming spiritual abuse. We talked about some things today. We have some folks. We have a couple of pastors who are going to talk from their perspective. A couple of them have experienced spiritual abuse as well. Nakia is going to be back. I'm going to tell some of my story that's not in the book. So you can hear some of my experience with spiritual abuse and where I am and how I still love God. I just don't care for all of his people because they don't act like him. So we're going to talk about that. I love everybody, but like we said before, sometimes we have to deal with people from a distance, and that's perfectly fine for ourselves. So I appreciate y'all for being here, and we're going to go ahead and sign off. Thank y'all and have a wonderful weekend. Be safe.